Go ahead, Peter.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and start the meeting. The first item on the agenda is to consider approving the minutes held from November 26th.
I move to accept those minutes.
I second that motion.
Move second, all in favor? Thank you. Next item is to approve a draft budget calendar for 2014-2015.
We got a copy of that into your packets that you may have had a chance to look at. We've tried to avoid the known conflicts that have been identified to us in the past. Certain vacation weeks, certain holidays, certain Lions Club meeting nights. I think there's an obligation on a Tuesday that we tried to avoid.
This looks good to me.
And so we tried to get everything in here that we've heard in the past. There's reasons to, move meetings around. So if it meets with your approval, we'll work with this schedule.
I make a motion, we accept this as our budget schedule for this year, unless we have to make changes along the way.
I'll second it.
Second, all in favor?
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Next, item number 3 is consider making an appointment for the MMA Legislative Policy Committee.
Yeah, I can explain that and introduce it a little bit. Ralph Farnham recently had to resign due to family reasons, that he has obligations, that he didn't think he could continue in his position. Because Ralph ran unopposed, representing this state Senate district, that's the area that this seat serves, hard to say fast. Laura Vayu at MMA, the staff person assigned to keeping the committee straight and functioning and manned, indicates that Oakland can select Ralph's replacement because he ran unopposed and won. I talked with Ralph, and he did not have an alternate. Sometimes a member of this committee will enlist an alternate, and a possibility might be for that alternate to take the seat. In this case, there is no alternate. So Oakland has an opportunity here to select one, to select an elected official. You have to be an elected official to do this, either like yourselves or a town manager, or a select person. That's kind of the way they do it. So
What about somebody from Budgetary Advisory?
that would probably work. That would probably work. But be that as it may, you would be the group that would entertain the selection and make a vote for a representative to fill Ralph's seat, if you choose. And if you didn't want to do that, or couldn't agree on someone, and MMA has another process of sending out ballots to the towns within this Senate district that Roger Cates represents, and try to come up with someone that would be supported by more votes than anybody else who might identify themselves. That's the process. I could also talk about the nature of the position if you want to hear it, or what's involved, or the time commitments, or anything like that.
I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about the time commitment, the structure, how often they meet,
Yep.
etc.
Okay, I've been on the committee representing towns where I've worked in the past, so I can tell you from experience. Principally, they meet on one Thursday a month during the legislative session. So depending upon when they start and stop, there's a Thursday involved. If you serve on the Legislative Policy Committee itself, you're invited for lunch. MMA provides a lunch. And the big committee of all 70 people would meet in the afternoon, generally at 1 o'clock. It's generally done by 3 p.m. because the people that come to this come from all parts of the state. So there's drive time in the middle. There's drive time, there's meeting, and there's drive time at the end for people to get home if they're so inclined. Some from Aroostook County come and stay overnight. But in addition to that, the workload, which is basically to review legislation that is in the hopper, that all the representatives put in, that has a municipal impact. Staff provides the winnowing service to come up with maybe as many as 1,000 bills that are introduced that may have an impact on municipalities. Those bills are sorted into 3 piles for each for a different subcommittee. There's a subcommittee on state and local government, there's a subcommittee on taxation, and there's a subcommittee on natural resource related issues. And so they do the best they can to get all the bills sorted into the right pile. and the subcommittee works its way through those during a morning meeting. And generally, they'll meet, they'll start maybe around 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning, depending on, how much they've got to do. And a list of those bills are prepared, and discussion ensues on, well, the staff stands up and tells you basically what each bill represents. There's an opportunity for discussion. Sometimes it's just obvious and everybody in the room doesn't need any explanation and everybody's in favor or opposed based on what it is. But you get a reading for what the municipal officials in the room feel about these pieces of legislation. Once each of the subcommittees has prepared what they call a consent agenda, which is a list of all the bills they review, they say, we recommend the bigger committee in the afternoon that we support these bills, that we oppose these bills, that we take no position on the remaining bills, something like that. You then have an opportunity to say, well, you know what, as a member of the big committee, I disagree, or I want to know more. So most of the bills get rubber stamp approval because the big group trusts the subcommittees to come to the correct municipal position. But there's always some disagreement on certain things. Some things are not unanimous by any means, and so they'll say, we want to pick this bill, and this bill off the consent agenda. You, as a member of the committee, can say you want any of that stuff taken off the consent agenda. Then the whole group debates this bill, or you get explanations that you didn't have until you asked for it. And then the whole committee votes on that particular bill. And so that process, believe it or not, can take place in one day with the morning session, the lunch, and then the afternoon session, and they manage to pull it off. The vice president of the organization chairs that big meeting. We're going to have a vice president because we're going to select one tomorrow. But yours truly may be chairing that first meeting in January, because the person that we hope becomes vice president has never been to one of those meetings before, so we're going to give her a little bit of an opportunity to see that at work before she's put up there in front of the whole group. So that's kind of a rundown. Is that adequate, or do you want to hear more or less?
So it's once a month.
During the legislative session. So the next one is January 16th. I don't know the dates, but there's one January, February, March. And then usually the legislature's out for the summer months, and so they're wrapping up May, something like that. Occasionally there are polls. MMA will want to poll the members of the LPC on a certain topic that may come up before the next meeting, but there's a hearing that they want to go and participate in, so Ralph was always getting materials, and Jan would contact him and ask him what it was MMA wanted to know, and he would weigh in, give his views. They count noses, down there, and say, we have 53 in favor of this and 17 opposed, and then our legislature, the purpose of the whole thing, I should have mentioned that, once MMA has gone through all this and set the municipal positions, then our lobbyists, 3 of them, go forth and give testimony at the legislative hearings to say what it is you've determined and argue for us. That, don't cut municipal revenue sharing, or we need to have a little more of this, a little less of that, no more mandates, or whatever it is. But they then can go to the legislature and say, our legislative policy committee told us what to say. That's how this stuff doesn't get dreamed up. It's determined by this representative group of municipal government officials. So it's pretty interesting. I recommend it, but it does take time. It does take effort. The packet, you'll get a packet like this. It's it's an inch thick of stuff that will come probably on the Saturday in the mail. If you want hard copy, you can get it electronically. But if on the Saturday prior to the Thursday, I found myself being much further ahead if I could at least read through the stuff once before I went to the meeting. And lots of times I didn't understand it. And lots of times the bill will say, this is a bill to improve the state of Maine. And then you read it and you might think that it's a destructive bill, but anyway, it's got this nice title. But there's a summary for every bill, so you can kind of read a little bit of at least what's intended with every bill at the very end. So it doesn't have to take hours and hours and hours to get ready, but if you've got an hour or two, it sure is helpful. How's that?
I would be interested in doing it if someone else didn't want to. I would, but that's just me. Unless you would. And if you would, then get up and go.
I don't wanna take that away.
No, you're not taking it. I would find it interesting, but that's fine, so you wouldn't go. You're retired, I'm not.
I was on I was on the Education Legislative Committee for many years, same basic process.
Say if you get,
I'd be willing to do it, but I don't, if you really wanna get involved, that's fine too.
you're retired, you want it?
Sure.
There you go. Someday I might just tool along with you if I can.
Oh, well, I should mention, there is that opportunity to name an alternate. And there are occasions when a person just can't make it, and then you would call your alternate and say, can you go? When you go as an alternate, you can vote. You're welcome at every meeting as an alternate, and you can take part in the discussion, but you can't vote. But I've done that myself, both as an alternate and sending my alternate, if there's conflicting dates, or you can't make it, or you're sick, or whatever, the alternate can go and play a meaningful role. I just want you to know that.
I think that would work out well.
If you would mind me tagging on with it.
Yeah, that would be excellent.
I make a motion, we appoint Don Borman as our Legislative Policy Committee member and Mike Perkins our alternate.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good job.
I think you'll find that it's a good thing for Oakland. And I also want to tell you that Ralph did a great job at every meeting that I was at, where he was representing. He asked good questions, he knew what was going on, he was looking out for Oakland, and, well, you got big shoes to fill, because he did a good job on that committee for a long time.
Number 4, I guess, Peter, would be up to you.
There's no action needed at this time. I put that item on the agenda in case we had communication from Sydney about that item, and there was nothing. So I'm thinking, until we hear from them, it's probably not appropriate for us to go any further with it. But I hadn't heard, so I just wanted that on the agenda in case maybe I got a call today, but I didn't, so.
Looking ahead at December, our next meeting, of course, schedule would be Christmas. I think everyone should be fairly busy that day.
You know, I think Christmas is not a bad, that night is kind of
Night
slow
would
at
be
my house.
slow,
I-
it'd be slow.
By that
It wouldn't
time.
be full, you guys would be like over your naps. When would you like to do? Because Christmas Eve would not be a good one on the 24th, or do you want to push it off till the week after? You tell me.
I have it on New Year's Eve instead.
New Year's Eve, there you go, see?
I wondered if
Bring pretzels.
I would
we
agree.
couldn't,
I agree.
what, New Year's Eve?
No, it's what you're saying. Seeing as the budget's coming up.
I was wondering about having Peter send us an email on the 27th, saying if we needed to have a meeting on the 30th, or if we could just wait till the next regular meeting.
It's the
You know,
27th would be
skip
fine.
it.
So
Skip
That's
if
a
you
great
need-
idea.
If you need us, then shoot us an email. We can plan on meeting
The
on the
30th is
30th.
good
Well,
for
that's
me.
a
I don't
great
know about
idea, I
your other
like that,
guys,
because
but I'm
something
ready.
might come up, and that next one in January might look a long ways off if something important came up.
Yeah,
But if we don't need it, why schedule
that's
it?
what I'd say, is skip it unless we get an email from you on the 27th. Maybe you could give us an update on the gas project and stuff like that on the 27th in your email, because that's
Okay,
gonna be critical to us, to what's going on, but
yep,
I don't know how
okay.
the other guys feel, but I,
Just to throw it out, how about the 2nd if we need it?
Either night, whichever meets
Well,
your,
either one.
whichever's
The
better for
second would
you.
work better for me.
The
It's a
second,
Wednesday, it's. No, excuse
it's
me,
not.
it's not, that's the wrong calendar.
oh, wait a minute.
The second
Sorry,
would be
sorry.
Thursday.
Yeah.
The second would be a
So
Thursday, that's
we
correct.
have to-
that's not good for me.
Won't be good for me.
So you're
I can
thinking
leave it as Monday if we need it.
Monday, which would be December 30th,
Yeah.
if needed.
And we'll hear from you on the 27th if we.
Okay, I'll do that anyway. I'll send you the
Yeah.
email and say we don't need to meet, or we do need to meet, but at least you'll get communication from me.
Yep.
Is that all right?
Works for
Okay,
me.
okay.
I might not be in town.
That's a
that
great
night. I think
idea.
I might be headed to do so, so.
Oh, for the 30th?
I might be leaving that day, the 30th, and won't be back till the next week. Told you to say it.
Oh, good for you. Either way, either
So
way.
Gabby's gonna be home, but I probably will not be here, so
Okay.
you go ahead and Myrtle Beach.
Well, you got another date that would work
Okay.
better, or you just want us to go with that for now?
You're gonna have to go with it, cause I'm gonna be in Myrtle Beach. I'll be gone all week, seriously.
Hard
How
won
much would it
vacation.
cost for us all to go to Myrtle
Come on
Beach
down.
with you?
Well, that's good.
Going into the manager's report?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there is in your packet a report from the assessor on her activities since the last one. As you can see, her annual wheel is turning nicely. Today, she had Nancy Weeks from the Maine Department of Revenue Services here, checking her work, essentially. It's a once a year exercise where the state comes up, looks at values, looks at sales data, makes the comparisons to make sure that our values are closely mirroring sales information. And she was here for the better part of the day, and we'll get a report later. And generally speaking, the state is always satisfied with the work that's done here, but just so you know, we don't function in a vacuum. But otherwise, the report probably speaks for itself. Dawn?
And I think we've talked a little bit about this previously, but in her report, she talks about meeting with folks from other area towns on the effect of the gas lines and how those are gonna be treated.
Yes.
And obviously, as we start talking about the budget, it's gonna be important for us to know what in fact we may be assessing those at and what the income derived from, or tax that might be derived there from. So I guess I would be curious as soon as possible if she could give us an indication of, do we have a value formula? And I'm assuming that's one of the things they're talking about, is how do we value the pipes that are now under the ground? And what will that mean for taxes based on our old mill rate? So if there's $1 million worth of infrastructure and we're 13 mills plus, that's a figure that may help us as we look at the budget. And she does also mention in here TIF talks. Are we, or has anybody mentioned specifics about TIFs to you or anybody else that they may be looking at? I know we've talked about specific ones with a past company, and then there were some things thrown around about TIFs might be used to help people pay for gas hookups. Has anything else been said, or do you anticipate that?
Yes, there have been 2 meetings held in Waterville on this subject. The representatives from Oakland are Byron and I, and the discussions so far have, the first meeting, we explained to each other the progress of the gas construction in each community. It's an interesting assortment of people who are meeting together. There are some that sort of originated the idea from the Sustainable Maine Coalition, and they have ideas that we call green technology in the forefront of their minds, and how this gas integrates with their ideas of the energy future for this region. The second meeting had, and then we sort of had this general talk about TIFs. The second meeting was more about TIFs, and we had, well, Kathy joined us at that meeting, because it is a goal of the assessors in this area to all be assessing the gas equipment and infrastructure that goes in the ground similarly, so they're not playing one off the other, but everybody's got kind of a common approach, if not the same value, for a foot of pipe underground in Oakland versus a foot of pipe underground in Waterville. So they are working together, and I guess the state, there is some training that is going to be available to them so that they can approach it that way. The TIF discussion has been so general that I don't think there's anything yet to put before you, but there has been some conversation, and let's see, I can give you a taste of the conversation. All of them, new tax money that comes to the town could be TIFed. The state of Maine determines whether the activities that you designate for that revenue are appropriate or not. You can use TIF tax money for some things, but not other things. And it may be that you're satisfied when this conversation takes place, that there is an acceptable range of activities to utilize the amount of money that you want to tip. The, let's see, the length of a TIF period in terms of years is something that you get to determine. You'll remember that we went through a TIF process for the first owners of the project that never came to fruition, and we designated a district. Well, a new district would have to be created, because all of the work that was done before is pretty much irrelevant, because this is a whole different concept. Ken Fletcher is Winslow counselor, and with much experience in energy, and was part of the governor's advisor group for a while. And he's suggested some things like, well, maybe the money from the transmission main, that could be put into one pot. Or money that comes to us, all of the infrastructure is taxable property, and money that comes from the distribution part of the project might go into another fund that could be used to incent more people to make the connection. There is discussion, Mike Roy has mentioned a few times that maybe we need to have a district to sort of deal with gas in this area, and the district would somehow do two things. One is to help people make energy improvements, whether if there are people that live out in the country and won't be eligible to get gas, but some of this money still might be made available to them to, say, insulate the house or install a heat pump or some other thing, so that maybe all the citizens derive a benefit from this new money. But there would have to be some kind of a committee that would say, well, here are the things that we do, here's the science, here are the offerings that you can use this money for. And another one of Ken's ideas was that this might be a revolving loan fund, so that if you needed $5,000 to retrofit your house, it would come out of this TIF money, but you'd have to pay it back, which means that somebody else could be helped by that further down the road. Well, then the question becomes how much money is coming from Oakland, and how much money will be ladled back in to help Oakland. And if I said, to make an example, being the economic man, I would love to have all the money from the whole region benefit Oakland people, and I would be trying to steer money that way. Well, and similarly, everyone might think that way. So there'd have to be some mechanism to make sure that Oakland's money helped Oakland, and that Oakland's money wasn't all going to help somebody in some other community, and vice versa. So there's a whole lot that's just talked about generally, and when and how this gets to the point of specifics is still to be determined. This group has met twice, and we're not scheduled to meet again until January. There are some deadlines that will become important. There was nothing in the ground April 1st of this year. There will be stuff in the ground April 1st of next year. So what is before and after those dates becomes important to determining how much TIF money there is. I guess that's the way to say it. So there will be conversations that you will need to hear, and you will need to make decisions that still are ahead of us, but not too far ahead of us, I guess would be the best answer to your question.
What would be the logical goal to have a decision for whether we have a TIF or not, and then if we do have a TIF, what would it be used, how it would be used? So I'm thinking, at some point, we need to have that in place for our budget, whether we're gonna get monies as part of our budget, or whether they're gonna be TIF monies. So what would you say would be the logical goal that we should be thinking by February 20th?
I
we
think
don't have a decision on what we're going to do.
putting the TIF in place would probably warrant some professional advice in terms of how you structure the thing, getting a whole talk about it from someone. Generally, attorneys are used for this purpose. I think KV Cog might be useful, and we might be able to get enough information to satisfy the things you need to know from that source. Summit may have something to say, since it's their investment that's making all this talk possible. And whether that all has to happen in the context of this next budget period or a year from now. The conversation at our last meeting was that all of this will be a year from now. It's not something that's gotta happen right this cycle coming up, starting right after the holiday. But we won't let any important opportunities lapse before you are given an opportunity to weigh in on the things that you will have to decide.
So is it feasible that you would actually have on April first, X amount of value in the ground that they would have to pay tax on regularly that first year, and then any TIF arrangements would be for the next year?
That could be because, it's also important to remember that this whole thing is not complete. This whole thing there will be more of it every year. And once people start talking about some of these complications, it's kind of like we've started going like this, because a year from now, there will be more infrastructure in the ground, and the following year, there will be still more. One of the things that I'll mention, I know we're still talking about the assessing quarterly report, but I can kind of slide into the natural gas project update. Apparently, it's out and about in Oakland that people think they may get service in 2014. And I had a call from Mike Duguay, the Summit guy, saying however that got started and whoever heard it, 2015 is the date for Oakland that they're really expecting to have gas ready for customers here in Oakland. So they had told us that at the fire station, but everybody talks with everybody, and things get going around. So he wanted to try and not have people all excited about getting gas next year. And it does matter to people who are thinking about buying a furnace or not, and what they want to do. I've had some inquiries from people who want to know if they want to buy the right furnace or wait a year or whatever.
Does that include the KMV part of Oakland?
Well, what we heard earlier this fall was that they were going to try to get out as far as the Shaw's Shopping Center this year. That's what they told us their goal was. They made it as far as Inland Hospital, and that's as far as they got. They had pipes strung out on the ground that they either have picked up or said they were going to pick up that went beyond Inland Hospital. Where they go from there, apparently they're still, even at the meeting I was at this morning, the question was, is there a street map of what's going to get serviced in 2014? And they weren't ready to talk about that yet. They've been trying so hard to get gas to Sappi and Hudamaki and Madison that next year's plans are not yet complete. They did tell us, however, that where they go, in what order, will depend upon who they hear from. So these ads that you're seeing in the newspaper, I would advise anybody who wants gas to let them know of your interest. It can only help bring it sooner if you're so inclined, but they're not making any commitments at this time.
Peter, on the information you read in the paper once in a while on TIFs, it's confusing to me as what you can use that money for. Because way back, seems like we were told you had to use it for economic development type things. But some of the information that's been in the paper from some of the other towns around that have talked about it, they had all kinds of things they were talking about using it for. I'm not
Yes.
saying that they were going to be able to, but they
Yes.
talked about it.
I think what you see there is, at one point in time, there was a fairly strict list of what was
Yeah.
accepted and what was not. And certainly, any infrastructure associated with a project is fair game. When we were talking about TIF earlier for the first people we were talking with, I had learned that Oakland could pay its dues to First Park. That was considered economic development enough. To hear some of the people at the meetings I've been at, it's now a list that's kind of morphed into whatever, and that you can almost use it for anything, and the state will approve it. I don't know.